Henry had always been drawn to the mysterious allure of antiques. One day, while browsing through an estate sale on the outskirts of town, he stumbled upon a peculiar mirror. It was large, ornate, and framed with intricate carvings of twisted vines and strange symbols. The mirror's surface was dark and somewhat cloudy, giving it an eerie, almost supernatural presence. The seller, an elderly woman with a wrinkled face and piercing blue eyes, claimed it was a family heirloom, passed down through generations. She warned Henry that the mirror was cursed, but he dismissed her words as mere superstition. Intrigued by its craftsmanship and the potential stories it held, Henry decided to buy the mirror and brought it home. His apartment was a small, cozy space filled with various antiques he had collected over the years. The mirror, however, became the centerpiece. He hung it in his living room, marveling at its beauty and the way it seemed to draw him in. Little did he know, this mirror would soon become the source of his deepest nightmares. The first night after bringing the mirror home, Henry had an unsettling dream. He found himself standing in front of the mirror, but his reflection was different. It stared back at him with hollow eyes and a sinister smile. The reflection seemed to mock him, mimicking his every move with a twisted, exaggerated demeanor. Henry woke up in a cold sweat, the image of his distorted reflection etched in his mind. Over the next few days, strange things began to happen. Objects in his apartment would move on their own, and he would catch glimpses of shadows darting across the room. The mirror became a focal point for these occurrences. Each time he looked into it, he felt an overwhelming sense of dread, as if something malevolent was watching him from the other side. Henry tried to ignore the strange phenomena, convincing himself it was just his imagination. But the dreams persisted, growing more vivid and terrifying. His reflection would speak to him in a raspy, mocking tone, revealing his deepest fears and insecurities. The line between reality and nightmare began to blur, leaving Henry in a state of constant unease. One night, Henry decided to confront his fears. He stood in front of the mirror, determined to face whatever lay within. As he stared into his reflection, it slowly began to change. The room around him grew darker, and his reflection morphed into a grotesque, demonic version of himself. The figure in the mirror reached out, its hand passing through the glass as if it were water. Terrified, Henry stumbled back, but the hand grabbed him, pulling him towards the mirror. He felt a cold, suffocating grip around his throat, and the room spun around him. Desperate to break free, he reached for the nearest object and smashed it against the mirror. The glass shattered, releasing him from its grip, but not before he glimpsed a dark, empty void beyond the broken surface. Henry collapsed on the floor, gasping for breath. The mirror lay in pieces around him, but the sense of dread remained. He knew that whatever had inhabited the mirror was now free, and he could feel its presence lingering in his apartment. Shadows danced along the walls, and whispers filled the air, echoing his deepest fears. Henry's attempts to rationalize the situation failed. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and could barely function. Every corner of his apartment seemed to hold a dark secret, every creak and groan a prelude to something sinister. He became a prisoner in his own home, paralyzed by fear and paranoia. Determined to understand what he was dealing with, Henry delved into the mirror's history. He visited libraries, contacted historians, and scoured online forums dedicated to the occult. The more he learned, the more he realized how dangerous his situation was. The mirror had a dark past, linked to a series of tragic events and mysterious deaths. The mirror had once belonged to a notorious occultist who used it to trap malevolent spirits. It was said that he had bound these entities to the mirror through a dark ritual, using it as a prison for the damned. After the occultist's death, the mirror changed hands several times, leaving a trail of misfortune and madness in its wake. Henry discovered that the mirror was a gateway to a dark dimension, a realm of suffering and despair. Breaking the mirror had released the trapped entities into his world. Desperate, he sought the help of a local historian who specialized in the occult. The historian provided him with a ritual to banish the spirits back into the void. The ritual required a personal sacrifice, a token of his own fears and insecurities. Henry knew what he had to do. On the night of the ritual, Henry stood in front of the broken mirror, holding a piece of his reflection, a shard of glass that had cut him deeply. He followed the historian's instructions, chanting the incantation and offering the shard as a symbol of his sacrifice. The room grew cold and the shadows intensified, swirling around him like a storm. As he completed the ritual, a blinding light filled the room, and the shadows screamed in agony. The mirror pieces vibrated and began to reassemble themselves, forming a new, unbroken surface. The light faded, and the room returned to its normal state. Henry looked into the mirror, seeing his own reflection once more. But this time, it was just him. The malevolent presence was gone. Henry's life slowly returned to normal, but he was forever changed by the experience. The mirror remained in his apartment, a constant reminder of the darkness he had faced. Though the malevolent spirits were banished, the sense of unease never fully left him. He couldn't shake the feeling that the mirror still held a part of that dark dimension, a lingering echo of the terror it had once contained. Henry continued to collect antiques, but he never again brought home anything that seemed too unusual or sinister. He had learned the hard way that some objects carry more than just history. They carry the weight of the unknown, and sometimes it's better to leave the past undisturbed. Months passed, and Henry tried to move on with his life. He made new friends, started a new job, and even began dating again. But the experience with the mirror had left a mark on him. He became more cautious, always looking over his shoulder and avoiding dark places. The nightmares persisted, though less frequent, and he often woke up in a cold sweat, the sound of whispers fading into the night. One evening, while sitting in his living room, Henry noticed something strange. The mirror, which had been silent for months, began to emit a faint glow. The light was soft and inviting, a stark contrast to the malevolent aura it once held. Curious, Henry approached the mirror, his heart pounding in his chest. As he stood before it, he saw not his own reflection, but a vision of the dark dimension. The scene was chaotic and nightmarish, filled with twisted landscapes and tormented souls. But amidst the chaos, he saw a figure, his own reflection, standing calmly in the center. The figure reached out, its expression one of sorrow and regret. Henry felt a pull, a connection to the figure in the mirror. He realized that a part of him was still trapped in that dark dimension, a fragment of his soul left behind during the ritual. Determined to reclaim it, he decided to confront the mirror once more. He prepared himself for the journey, gathering the necessary items for a second ritual. This time, he was not alone. He enlisted the help of his friends, explaining the situation and the dangers involved. Together, they performed the ritual, chanting the incantation and focusing their energy on the mirror. As the ritual progressed, the room grew cold and the shadows began to swirl. The mirror's glow intensified and the vision of the dark dimension became clearer. Henry felt a surge of energy, a connection to his trapped fragment. He reached out, his hand passing through the glass as if it were water. He found himself standing in the dark dimension, surrounded by chaos and torment. The figure of his reflection stood before him, its expression now one of determination. Henry understood that he had to confront his deepest fears and insecurities to reclaim his lost fragment. The journey through the dark dimension was harrowing. Henry faced twisted versions of his past, reliving moments of pain and regret. But with each step, he grew stronger, his resolve unwavering. He confronted the figure, embracing it as a part of himself, and felt a surge of energy as the fragment of his soul rejoined him. With his soul whole once more, Henry felt a sense of peace and clarity. The dark dimension began to fade, and he found himself back in his apartment, surrounded by his friends. The mirror's glow dimmed, its power now dormant. Henry's life slowly returned to normal, but he was forever changed by the experience. The mirror remained in his apartment, a constant reminder of the darkness he had faced. Though the malevolent spirits were banished, the sense of unease never fully left him. He couldn't shake the feeling that the mirror still held a part of that dark dimension, a lingering echo of the terror it had once contained. Henry continued to collect antiques, but he never again brought home anything that seemed too unusual or sinister. He had learned the hard way that some objects carry more than just history. They carry the weight of the unknown, and sometimes it's better to leave the past undisturbed.